Hello, friends. Join us in Las Vegas for Stand Up with Pete Dominick, Pod Jam, comedy, music, and podcast tapings. J.L. Covan, Christian Finnegan, Ophira Eisenberg, John Carroll, Gareth Sever, and more. For more information or to buy tickets, go to the ticket link in the show notes. Any questions, email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Yeah, I am here and you are here and we're ready to do it. Joining us, a very special conversation with writer, journalist, entrepreneur, professor of journalism, the great Jeff Jarvis, who has just announced he's retiring from his official teaching job at a journalism school, the Craig Newmark School in New York City. I thought what a great opportunity it would be to talk with Jeff about what he's learned in life. I want to have more of these conversations with people who have been as successful in as many ways as Jeff Jarvis, all while being a pretty darn good guy. His reputation is real stellar and a good friend of mine. I haven't talked to him in a long time. I think you'll enjoy our conversation, which begins at about 24 minutes in, but lots to get to on today's news segment. Of course, you've got the Iowa caucus results, which I stayed up late for you for. A whole bunch of other news to share with you as well from the weekend. I took yesterday off, Martin Luther King Day, and yet the news did not stop, even though I was off, including my own. I'm sure that, well, maybe you didn't hear, and so you're hearing for the first time. On Saturday night, I took Ava to the Glenn Kirshner Justice Matters event hosted by the one and only actor Robert De Niro. That's right, De Niro cozied up to Kirshner because he likes seeing him on MSNBC, and I guess when you're a celebrity, when you're a legend, one of the greatest actors of our time, and you want to meet some legal commentator on television, you can find him and you can call him, and that's pretty much exactly what he did. And he befriended Glenn. They became pretty cool, and then he told Glenn that he knew he was going to host this event in New York. Have it at my place. Robert De Niro has a restaurant. Glenn Kirshner had an invite list of his paid subscribers as well as many of his friends, including me and so many others. And I got to bring Ava to meet De Niro and Lawrence O'Donnell because I knew he was going to be there. And he, of course, is a screenwriter, one of the producers and writers of The West Wing. And that's what my daughter Ava is studying. In college, she's studying television, film, media, and she is an actor, director, writer herself. And Lawrence O'Donnell, who is the host of The Last Word on 10 o'clock at MSNBC, couldn't have been kinder to Ava. Talked to her initially when I introduced him, and then he came back to her and talked to her for 10 more minutes, invited us out to lunch with him. He just couldn't have been more generous, and kind, and authentic with his time, and it was so great to see him and Ellie Mistal and Dino Bidala. Little Steven of the E Street Band was there, and I had a real fun chat with him. We were talking mostly about social media, but I was making him laugh and busting Dean's balls. It was a really fun night. Had a great talk with Ellie and Danielle Moody, Al Segel, Jonathan Capehart, Andrew Weissman, and Mimi Roca were also there, and I'm missing a few others, but it was a real fun night. Ava wasn't that interested in all the conversation around the legal issues and the end of democracy and the threat that Trump poses, but she wasn't necessarily there for that. It was a real great opportunity, and I shared pictures yesterday in the subscriber email as well as everywhere on social media, so if you want to go see it. And thank you very much for all of your kind comments. It was a real fun thing to do, and I got to also close the event as I always do. This is, I think, the fourth time Glenn's had me come in and close the event, and I roast him a little bit, bust his chops a little bit, and then I gave a more thoughtful commentary, and it was really wonderful. It was just an amazing experience to have with my almost 19-year-old daughter. Ava will be 19 this weekend, and then, she's going back to college again, and it's going to be hard again, and I'm going to miss her so much. We've had a wonderful time during this break, but that certainly was the best of it over this break, and super grateful, lucky, and privileged, and happy that she went with me, because definitely one for the history books. She just briefly talked to De Niro after I got done performing. That kind of put me on the map in the room, and De Niro came over to me, and it's all kind of surreal, but to be performing and using De Niro in your act, like I'm making fun of Glenn and I'm referring to, we're here with Robert De Niro, one of the greatest actors of all time, and I always do jokes about how jealous I am of Glenn, how he was a former federal prosecutor while I've had this long career in media, and he starts doing it, passes me by in like a heartbeat. Now he's got, friends like Robert De Niro and my actor friends like Scott Baio, jokes like that. It was fun. It's always great. Glenn is great, and it was a wonderful, wonderful night. Obviously, I could talk about it for a long time. I'll talk to you more about it at the Hangout if anybody has any questions about it. But again, thanks for all of your kind words. And let's now get to the news. How about it? Of course, the top story on Monday was the Iowa caucuses and who would come out on top in the Republican race. Everybody knew that Biden would win for the Democrats, but with a blast of frigid cold air, an Arctic blast, a polar plunge, people went to the caucuses in Iowa last night, and surprise, surprise, they still love Donald Trump in Iowa. Voters braved that bitter cold. They looked past his legal troubles, that he was a rapist, that he is an insurrectionist, that he is a terrible human being, and they embraced his vision of vengeful disruption. According to one thing I read. Well, there you go. Donald Trump wins the Iowa caucus, and Iowa, one of the least representative states in the country. But that's the big news from last night. I didn't stay up late enough to see who came in second and third, but I'm predicting Nikki Haley, then Ron DeSantis, then Vivek. What's he going to do? Plenty more news and analysis and reaction to the results of the Iowa caucuses in the next couple of days, I'm sure. Of course, next Tuesday is the New Hampshire primary, and then on February 6th, it's Nevada. On the 24th of February, South Carolina. Michigan on the 27th. Super Tuesday is March 5th. Just some upcoming dates to be aware of. And in terms of other headlines from yesterday, if this is a true story, it's a big setback for Russia because apparently the Ukraine shot down a Russian spy plane and airborne command center. Kiev's military chief reported on Monday it would be a significant blow to the Kremlin's forces. So that's a big story. So are the election results in Taiwan. They certainly have China's attention. I'll be talking about that with an expert probably on tomorrow's show. But voters in Taiwan elected Vice President Lai Ching-te, I think as his name is said, as their next president Saturday, defying warnings from Beijing not to support a candidate that it had for a long time called a separatist and a troublemaker. And I'm real curious about that and want to learn more, which is why I've reached out to Dexter Roberts to come back on the show and talk about it. And thank you to Dan for the request for that guest. Longtime listener Dan Mascalco called or emailed me yesterday and said, hey, can you get someone on to talk about these Taiwanese elections? I want to learn more about it. And that's what I did. So looking forward to talking with Dexter tomorrow. More headlines, I say. All right. Well, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was released from the hospital yesterday after more than 2 weeks at Walter Reed, according to a statement from the Pentagon. Hope he's okay. And speaking of the Biden administration, on Sunday, they told Texas to stop impeding U.S. Border Patrol access to a portion of the U.S.-Mexico border that National Guard took over last week. So it's crazy, the confrontations between the different law enforcement, state and federal law enforcement agencies in Texas. I want to learn more about that as well. And speaking of Texas, their Supreme Court denied their Attorney General, the cartoon villain Ken Paxton's request to block his deposition Friday in a lawsuit from his former top-ranking deputies who allege Paxton wrongfully terminated them after reporting him to federal authorities. That's how much of a piece of crap the dude is. Oh, speaking of terrible people, Senator Rand Paul yesterday told a radio host that former U.S. chief medical advisor and hero to many, Dr. Anthony Fauci, should, quote, go to prison over his dishonesty in handling the COVID-19 pandemic and for lying to Congress. So more great commentary and accusations from the all-powerful Rand Paul of Kentucky. John Kerry announced yesterday he would be stepping down from his role as U.S. climate envoy, told NBC News, vacating his position in the Biden administration to continue working on the issue in other ways, apparently. I'm interested to see where John Kerry goes and who replaces him in that very important role. And apparently today, many hundreds of U.S. government employees from several agencies may walk out of work to protest President Biden's policies in the Middle East as vis-a-vis to Gaza. And apparently the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, called for federal workers to be fired if they participate in a walkout protesting the Biden administration's support of Israel as it battles Hamas. He posted on X, Twitter, Mike Johnson did. He said, any government worker who walks off the job to protest U.S. support for our ally Israel is ignoring their responsibility and abusing the trust of taxpayers. They deserve to be fired. Oversight Chairman James Comer and I will be working together to ensure that each federal agency initiates appropriate disciplinary proceedings against any person who walks out on their job. So I guess if it's the First Amendment, if you provoke or participate in a violent insurrection at the Capitol, that's the First Amendment. But it's not the First Amendment if you stage a peaceful protest at work. But it is if you conduct a violent insurrection at the Capitol. I mean, how about this? How about any congressional members who protested the legitimacy of a fair election and thus engaged in that insurrection? How about they get fired? How about that? You like that? Where are you going, Mike? Oh, he doesn't like my idea. How about this news? This is a new study based on information from the CDC and Kaiser Health. A Forbes advisor conducted the analysis and ranked the unhealthiest population in the United States by state. This new study has identified the regions with the least healthy folks. And according to the CDC, chronic diseases and health conditions that last year or longer will require ongoing medical treatment. That's one main way to determine lack of health. The CDC notes that these illnesses such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes are the nation's leading causes of death and disability. As for the unhealthiest state in America, what do you think it is? Take a guess. Guess what? At number one, it's the mountain state, West Virginia. Considered ground zero for America's opioid crisis, stands out with the highest drug overdose death rate in the U.S., according to the analysis. And lately, the use of fentanyl and the so-called zombie drug, xylazine, has fueled the state's epidemic. I'm not even familiar with that. So now I got to learn about what xylazine is. The zombie drug it's called. West Virginia also has the highest percentage of adults who smoke, which is at 21%, the highest percentage of adults who are obese at 41%, and the second shortest life expectancy nationwide, which is 73.9 years. Mississippi is the second healthiest state, has the shortest life expectancy at 73.63 years. And aside from West Virginia and Mississippi, 6 other southern states are among the top 10 unhealthiest. How about that? It goes West Virginia, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Ohio, and number 10 unhealthiest state is Indiana. And the healthiest states in the country are Hawaii, Utah, Connecticut, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Colorado, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Washington, and number 10, my state of New York. California does not make the top 10 in either. Forbes ranked the Golden State as the 38th unhealthiest in the U.S. For more on that, it's from Forbes Advisors analysis of information from the CDC and Kaiser Family Foundation, as well as Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So I thought that was interesting enough to share in the headlines here. Now let's get to, that's all the headlines I've got for you. Let's get to some sound from yesterday. We start, of course, in Iowa, where it was a very early night. No surprises. Here's how it sounded with Jay Tapper and John King on CNN with the call.
All right, John King, we can now make a very important projection. CNN projects that Donald Trump will win the Iowa caucuses. CNN can make this projection based on his overwhelming lead in our entrance poll of Iowa caucus goers and some initial votes that are coming in. The former president pulling off a huge early victory in his bid to return to the White House. Trump easily defeating his top opponents, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, who are now in a high-stakes fight for second place. Let's go to Aaron Burnett at the panel. Aaron, not a surprise, but still, this is the earliest I can remember ever calling such a thing.
Exactly. Both things are true. Not a surprise. And yet it is 8:30 Eastern. Those caucus doors opened 30 minutes ago. And here we are, Caitlin, with a projection. And you could see it in those entrance polls. But, I mean, it is very decisive.
Yeah, and the question for Trump's team really here is how big is this victory going to be? They expected for him to win. Obviously, if he did it, it would be like a meteor striking the earth in their world. Their question is, what is that margin going to look like? And you can see Donald Trump is speaking, his sons are speaking, he has allies and operatives fanned out at every precinct making his case to everyone who is at these caucuses. And it just speaks to the moment that we are in. I mean, Donald Trump 8 years ago left Iowa with a loss to Ted Cruz. And not only did he not accept that loss, he claimed that they should nullify the result and went on to New Hampshire. What he's planning to do now, we've now just learned, is tonight he's going to New York, and tomorrow he'll attend the opening arguments of the E. Jean Carroll trial, where the jury is going to determine how much he owes in damages and that. And then he'll be going to New Hampshire tomorrow night after that. And it just speaks to how he is really balancing the campaign trail and the courthouse here in these moments. And so we will likely hear from him tonight. But it goes to what this campaign and what this primary is being defined by. And it's Donald Trump's legal troubles, but also really decisive victories and a strong hold on the Republican Party.
All right. Well, good analysis. She's not wrong about any of that. Would you disagree? And that was the early call last night. David Rothkopf tweeted, "There's one thing really important to keep in mind about the Iowa caucuses. They don't matter. They will change nothing. They are reflective of a tiny minority of voters in a small state that is not representative of the United States, voting in the dumbest way possible." Iowa, one of the whitest states in the country, by the way, with like 85% of people who are there are white. Well, there you go. And so it is Trump in first, the battle for second. I'm not sure who it's going to be, but I am not going to wait up for it to put it in this episode of the podcast. So let's move on to some of the other sound I've got for you. This clip went pretty viral yesterday from Fox News' Neil Cavuto. He was talking to the governor of Iowa. Her name is Kim Reynolds, and she made it clear that she'd vote for the Republican nominee no matter what, even in the face of all of the nasty things that Donald Trump has said about her. As a matter of fact, over the weekend, Trump also criticized the governor of Iowa for being disloyal to him by supporting Ron DeSantis. She claimed that his endorsement saved her campaign and that she's now the least popular governor in the country. Here is the clip between Neil Cavuto and this hollow, empty person named Kim Reynolds.
Governor, when I spoke to Nikki Haley this morning at a diner, I love talking to people in diners. We should do this again at a diner.
I know,
but
me too.
One of the things I learned from her is that, look, if it comes down to Donald Trump as the nominee, I'll support him. I'll support whoever our nominee is. Do you share that view? Does the Governor DeSantis, share that view?
Well, you'll have to ask Governor DeSantis that, but I've made it clear that I will. I'm a Republican, and, all of the candidates running are going to be better than what we have.
All the stuff he said about you?
Well, because, we've got to win. We are a resilient people. This country is in trouble. Look at the southern border.
I talked to a lot of people at that diner, Governor, who said, no, this isn't worth it. To go to Trump, no.
Yeah, well, people are going to I just think, too, when you look at the direction of the country, I believe it's going to be Ron. So I believe he's our best shot.
But if it were Trump and Biden, you, the governor of Iowa, very popular governor, would go.
I'm on record saying that and consistently saying that. I'm a Republican, and we need to make sure that we don't reelect President Biden for another 4 years.
Wow. It's just, not surprising, but still bizarre to hear. Also yesterday, Dr. Ben Carson, he also went viral because his conversation with Neil Cavuto was so awkward.
Well, you think about the Bible and King David. Most of those people probably, if they were alive back in those days, would have said, "Oh, what a horrible guy." The episode with Bathsheba and some of the other things that he did. And yet he was a man after God's own heart. God uses different people for different times. You need somebody with a Manhattan business type of personality to deal with the administrative state. There are some real wolves in that Manhattan business environment, and to succeed in that, you don't just kind of be a flowery, nice person necessarily. No. That doesn't mean he can't be. I've seen him. When he's not being attacked, he's a wonderful person. Everybody, I think, would love him.
But just to be clear, you're comparing him to King David?
The volume is very low.
Okay, I'm sorry. You are, just to put up for the record, you're comparing him to King David, and that worked out well for King David, and that this is another King David, right?
I don't know about him, King. But certainly he has some policies that are very worthwhile. And the other thing, Neil, that must be mentioned, if the left is allowed to use the DOJ to hurt him and to eliminate him from the process, then that's when we lose democracy.
Oh. Okay, that's when we lose democracy. Thank you, Dr. Ben Carson. More brilliance from the good doctor. But how about this statistic from Fox News? Nearly 7 in 10 Nikki Haley voters say they would not back Donald Trump if he's the nominee.
About 3 in 10 Iowa Republicans say they would be so dissatisfied with DeSantis and Haley as their candidate, they would not vote for them in November, while about 2 in 10 say the same about Donald Trump. And get this, nearly 7 in 10 Haley voters say they wouldn't back Trump if he's the GOP nominee, while 4 in 10 of his supporters wouldn't vote for her.
Wow. Well, I thought that was pretty interesting, and I don't know how accurate it is, but here is former Trump supporter, mega millionaire Ken Langone, who was a big Trumpy, big MAGA guy. He now tells Fox News' Neil Cavuto, Trump doesn't have the demeanor or personality to be president.
Unfortunately, Neil, he doesn't have the demeanor or the personality to be a president.
But if he is the nominee, Ken, if he is the nominee, you would support him.
Elaine Langone for president, if he's the nominee.
So
okay?
You would write your wife's name in rather than vote for him.
I think right now that's what I do, although, you know.
All right, well, he's going to write his wife's name in. Glad he was a guest on that program yesterday. I also have no idea why I pulled that audio for you. It really wasted all of our time. But here's something more important. Here is the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, yesterday in South Carolina, giving a speech on Martin Luther King Day.
As Vice President of the United States, I'd say at this moment in America, freedom is under profound threat. Today, in fact, we are witnessing a full-on attack on hard-fought, hard-won freedoms. Consider, in states across our nation, extremists attack the sacred freedom to vote. They pass laws to ban drop boxes, limit early voting, and restrict absentee ballots. In Georgia, extremists have the gall to pass a law to even make it illegal to simply offer food and water to people standing in line for hours to exercise their basic civic duty. I ask the friends, whatever happened to love thy neighbor? The hypocrisy abounds.
The vice president went on to quote the great Coretta Scott King, saying, freedom is never truly won. You earn it and win it in every generation. In this moment, it is our duty to stand in the defense of freedom. And man, that couldn't be more accurate than the world we're living in, the America we're living in now. I just unfortunately feel like we are the ones we've been waiting for. Lots of work to do, folks. And I'm happy to be on this journey to do it with you. But before I get to my conversation with Jeff Jarvis, the Emmys were last night. I didn't even know the Emmys were last night, but the show I work on last week tonight won again for Outstanding Scripted Variety Series at the 75th Emmys. And I just quickly wanted to play John Oliver's acceptance speech for that because I thought it was pretty funny. Apparently, Anthony Anderson's mother is part of playing people off for real. She's like literally standing there in the audience. So you kind of need to know that to get the reference. But I thought this is a funny minute to end on.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much to my staff. Many of them are here tonight. Liz Stanton and Tim Carville, who's not here. He's back in New York with some of our other staff who are burning down a bar there somewhere. Thank you. They all work so hard. Thank you to HBO, Casey, Nina, and our lawyers who are angry with us all the time. Thank you to my wife, Kate, who is here tonight. I love you very much. Our kids, Hudson and Marcy, are not here, and they are so mad that I left this morning. I promised them Pokemon cards, and I don't know where to get Pokemon cards in LA. So if anyone knows where to get Pokemon cards between here and LAX, it's a significant problem that I've worked myself into. I am not leaving without getting played off by Anthony Anderson's mom, so I'm going to start reading off the names of the Liverpool football team. In goal, Alisson Becker. Then you got Trent Alexander-Arnold. Then you got Virgil van Dijk, obviously. Oh, she's not here. I can get through the whole team then.
Baby.
Oh, I'd like to thank Jesus and my family. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, yeah. We did it again. Well, they did it. I'm just the audience warm-up comedian, but it's a great show to be a part of, and I'm really excited for John and the staff at Last Week Tonight. Very, very cool, smart, hilarious group of people doing very, very important work. Speaking of someone who's done very, very important work, it's now time to get to my guest. Jeff Jarvis has joined me many times on the show, but when I recently heard that he was retiring for the Newmark Graduate School of Journalism in New York City, I wanted to talk to him about his life and his career, and that's what we did. I think it's always a great privilege and honor and opportunity to talk to somebody who's getting towards the end of their career. Jeff is never going to stop working, I know that for sure, but ask them what they've learned and what they would have maybe done differently and what wisdom or advice they have for the rest of us about living and working and finding balance. And so I thought that would be a great opportunity to do with Jeff, and this is a little bit different conversation, but I loved it. I love talking to him. I think he's brilliant. He's had such an amazing, diverse career in journalism and media and as a professor these last 18 years. You can find Jeff on all the social medias as well as get his new books. He talks about them here on today's show. We've talked before, of course, about his newest book, the Gutenberg Parenthesis. I think you're really going to love this. Well, I hope you do. A little bit different. An almost hour-long conversation with Jeff. If you've got the time, I hope you enjoy it. Let's do it right now with the legend, Jeff Jarvis. Yeah, there he is, Jeff Jarvis, fresh off a book, a Senate testimony, and apparently a, quote, retirement from at least one institution, at least. I don't think you're retiring fully. Hi, Jeff.
Air quotes. Hello, friend. It's been a while. So good to see you.
Been way too long. You've been very busy, though. Very busy with the book and the Senate, apparently.
Yeah. I was brought in as the beard in the Senate so that they could, the lobbyists and the legislators could all say how they loved each other and the laws they're writing together. And I could be the one person who disagrees, who's not called on, but hey, he was there. He would have disagreed. And so that's fine.
I want to get into that later because I first just want to talk to you, as I said in the intro, just about your life and career and kind of where you're at. You're going to continue to do all kinds of really exciting things, I know, but talk to us about your career specifically in academia and what this quote retirement means.
Well, let's also put air quotes around academia because I'm only a journalism professor. I don't have a PhD. I'm a fake, but I managed to be a poseur for 17 years at the wonderful institution of CUNY.
You teach a course called Imposter Syndrome.
Yeah, I actually, I've been thinking about that because every student who comes in, every one of our programs does have imposter syndrome. And I do too. And the joy of teaching is to give them confidence so they don't feel that anymore. That's the whole thing right there.
I love that. And with the only way to really get that, though, I feel like is experience. You can get it in the class.
But I think they come in, why come to journalism school? Why don't you just go to journalism? You can, but they come in to learn skills or in the engagement journalism program that I helped start with my colleague, Carrie Brown. They come in to blow up journalism and rethink it and be able to talk about that. And then the executive program I started with my colleague, Anita Salina, and others since, these are managing editors and vice presidents and people who have some oomph in the business. And they all come in with imposter syndrome. They all think I'm not worthy to sit at the same table with somebody from the FT or the New York Times. And they leave with confidence. And it's a beautiful thing to see.
I want to talk to how you became you and how you got to where you are now. And so when you were a young man and you were thinking about work and career and education, did you have dreams? Did you have ideas, or were you pretty open-minded about it all?
No, I was going to go into politics. I'm a child of the 60s. So I organized a moratorium march in like the 8th grade. Yeah, so I was obnoxious. Wow. Know-it-all piece of shit. And
a moratorium on what?
I thought I'd go the moratorium. Oh, you're so young, you don't even know. The anti-Vietnam moratorium.
Got it.
The moratorium. So I was going to go to politics, and I went to Claremont, what was then Claremont Men's College, now Claremont McKenna, because most people there went to law school, and I go to politics. I get there, and I say, another 3 years after 4 years of this? I don't think so. And I looked around, and I'd been on the school paper by chance because I was a kind of geeky student, who's on the student council and the school paper, and you wouldn't have talked to me because you were way too cool. And so I looked around and I said, oh, well, people kind of make a living doing that. So I said, why don't I try that? And I transferred to Northwestern, went to journalism school, got out, got jobs. I got jobs as I was going in. So I worked straight from age 17 on. I didn't stop until I went and left to teach in 2006.
Talk to me about some of those jobs, because you had some pretty cool jobs. You started some pretty cool things. And I eventually want to get to when your relationship with Howard Stern began, because I think I have a good understanding of it, but I want your version. So what was the first gig you got?
First gig was a small suburban chain in Illinois, Chicago area, the Addison Herald Register. The editor was so insane that the staff would unlock the back door in case he went berserk. We were scared of him. So I did that while I was in journalism school. I did internships, the Burlington, Iowa Hawkeye, the Detroit Free Press. Then I got a job on Chicago Today, a paper that had no tomorrow. It died exactly 1 year after I started there. It was the old Hearst paper in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
Tribune had bought it to be anti-competitive. It was the 73 oil embargo. That's how old I was. I covered that. I was the gas correspondent, and that was a cool thing to do. And then it went under, and I made it to the Chicago Tribune on the midnight shift, waiting for somebody to die a horrible death so I could write about it. And to get off of that, I volunteered to do a job that actually no one wanted. It sounded impressive. I became an assistant city editor at age 21, but it was a job where you just had to go through all the copy. I did that. At the same time, they had installed these computers next to all of our desks. We didn't know what they were. This is long, long, long ago. Nobody wanted to touch them. It was like the apes in 2001 dancing around it, afraid of it, right? But I'm the kid, so I play with it. I'm not scared of it. I ended up training the whole newsroom in the computers. This is a cursor. No. Don't hit return at the end of the line. Just believe me, keep typing and see what happens. I trained them all. And I became the newsroom geek as well. And that changed my life because I became the guy who likes computers. They screwed me over. I went to the San Francisco Examiner. Publisher liked a caption. I was Sunday editor, liked a caption I wrote. I became a columnist 6 days a week, 1,500 words a day. About killed me, but it was fun.
Wow.
Then I didn't get along with the publisher. Dianne Feinstein had it out for me. So I left. I went to People magazine, where I became eventually the TV critic. And then I started Entertainment Weekly because I had this idea for it. It took 6 years after I proposed it because the editor of Time Inc., Henry Grunwald, said, one magazine cannot possibly serve all of entertainment. People who watch TV do not read.
Right.
And but it started, and it was a horrible launch, but I got through that, and then I left. That's a whole long story. I'll spare you, though I do tell it in my other new book called Magazine.
What is this about? I didn't know about that.
This is another book. This is part of the Object Lesson series I'm plugging myself, for Bloomsbury. And it's a fun little book about the magazine as Object. And I tell my story at last of the difficult launch of Entertainment Weekly.
Oh, that's
so I walk
fascinating.
out of there, I go to the New York Daily News, a Sunday editor. I walk out of there, went bankrupt, and I end up TV Guide, TV critic. And then I leave there and I go to Advanced Publications, which is Condé Nast, to become the online guy. Did that until I started teaching. So that's the whole resume.
What was the best job of all those?
Oh, that's interesting. You never appreciate it when you're in it, but I suppose being a TV critic was a lot of fun in the time. Yeah. But you know what? I'm curious what you think about this. Would you want to be a TV critic today?
God, I think you'd probably get swatted.
Yeah. I think it would be, A, so much of the programming is depressing.
Yeah. B,
there's way too much of it to really think you can do that anymore. And I just don't like it as much. I love TV. Tom Shales just died. Tom Shales, Washington Post, was I would flatter myself to think I could be a tenth of what Tom Shales was. He was the most amazing TV critic ever. Tremendous wit, grumpy as could be, left and turned very bitter because they couldn't afford him anymore. But Tom Shales was brilliant. The thing that I learned from Tom Shales, the thing that tied him and me together, I'd like to think, is that we both loved TV, respected the audience, and we got angry when TV was bad, but we loved TV when it was good. And it was a great time to do that. So I suppose that was the most fun.
I mean, it would seem like that would be such an amazing gig, television critic. I mean, what was the lifestyle like? You watched TV and you wrote about it.
Yeah, not a bad gig. But this is they were just moving off 3 networks. So HBO had just started, and I got in trouble because HBO was owned by Time Inc., which also owned People and Entertainment Weekly. And the head of HBO would get mad at me because I would point out that HBO at the time, this was long before The Sopranos, would just find excuses for bare women's breasts because they could. It was cable, and it was crap. So the wonders of cable hadn't really started yet. It was still the networks, but this was also the time of Hill Street Blues and Cosby when he wasn't maybe he was a molester then, but when he wasn't, persona non grata as he is now, and All in the Family and all kinds of amazing shows that changed the country. And I think we're a golden age of sort. So I got 3/4-inch tapes, big monster tapes, and had to watch. I remember I vowed I would never fast forward. So the torture of my entire tenure was having to watch 14 hours of miniseries AD, which was just awful. But I kind of loved it. Bill Cosby sent me hate mail. Let's see. Alan Thicke sent me a letter saying that I should stop making him my whipping boy. Murphy Brown insulted me on the show. These are the highlights of my career.
I was literally was about to ask you what your relationship was like with the people that you cover, that you wrote about. I'm sure some of them liked you, but they care a lot about what you wrote. And so you're answering it. So go ahead. Bill Cosby, Murphy Brown.
Jay Leno called to whine. You really didn't like the show?
Really?
That's what I said, Jay. No, I didn't like the show. But no, I tried to have no relationship with him.
With anyone?
No, I didn't want to, because I think a critic should be in loco audience. When I started EW, I didn't want any of the critics to write features about the people they reviewed. I want them to be
Did anyone ever tell you off to your face after you wrote something negative?
No, actually. They sent notes.
Always sent notes.
Yeah.
Or calls. Well, you didn't like it.
You really didn't like it? No. I never got... I admired immensely at a generational level David Letterman. I never got to even sit in the show. Once they invited critics over, and David got hinky about it, and so we weren't allowed to sit in the auditorium.
Huh.
They put us in a room with a TV. I said I can do that at home. So I never got to meet Letterman, which is a. Did you ever meet Letterman?
Never met him. I was my friend was a warm-up comedian, and I would go and I was looking to be a warm-up at that time, and that's when I got hired at The Daily Show. And then I eventually did warm-up for Colbert in the Ed Sullivan Theater, but it wasn't bittersweet because it wasn't like, I don't know, so many of my dreams came true. I would, of course, have loved him on Letterman. I never did appear on it, but I did actually stand on the Ed Sullivan stage and perform with where the Beatles performed. So I felt good about that.
Pretty damn cool.
But tell me about your relationship with then Howard Stern. I mean, my understanding is that you were one of the people who wrote about him and kind of saw what he was doing, approved of what he was doing to the extent of how entertaining it was, and had a certain respect for him when others didn't.
Well, I think to this day, people dismiss Howard Stern, and they're wrong about it. And I frankly kind of did too. I decided I was going to review his CBS shows. I was TV critic, not radio critic.
Right.
So we had a CBS show for a while, and I decided that it was best to also listen to the show. And I had presumed what everybody else did, that it was Howard, it was dumb jokes, and that was that. I soon found, as I wrote in my review, that he was more than the sum of his farts, and that he was brilliant. Even then, with all the crass Howard jokes, a brilliant interviewer. Now he's beyond amazing. And that the atmosphere of the show was Dilbert before Dilbert was a bad thing we don't talk about.
Right.
Right. And it was every office you've ever been in and every co-working situation you've ever been in. And so I thought it was brilliant. And I wrote a review saying this, and he on the air was grateful and said that he offered to give me oral favors. Which disgusted my wife at the time. It kind of me. And my wife, she was just disgusted.
She's still disgusted.
She's still disgusted. And then one time I went in to look at their technology. The guy who used to work at IBM, who worked with Howard, invited me in to see. I was making fun that Howard was not working on a Mac; he was still working on an IBM. Mm-hmm. And so that caused me to be invited into the studio. And I was just going to be a tour around, but then Howard said, "Oh, come on in." And then he got me to talk about my prostate cancer. So I talked about my limp dick on Howard Stern. What's more perfect?
Wow, I didn't know that last part. I got to find that. You must have that audio somewhere.
Somewhere I do.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is amazing. How old were you then?
Oh, there wasn't that. This is probably.
Oh, this was Sirius XM?
Yeah, it was Sirius.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's the first time I ever heard you was on the air. I'm listening to Howard, and there's just Jeff Jarvis, and I'm like, this guy's great. And then, I followed your career and watched you on TV.
So you remember Howard 100 News, and I was friendly with that whole crew.
Oh, yeah, so was I. Yeah.
He was doing that, right? And so I would come and hang out with them occasionally, and that's how I got the VIP number. So when I call in, I still call in. I don't call in often. I don't want to ever abuse the privilege. But when I have something that I think to say to Howard, I call into that number. So I have to wait on hold forever. That's very nice. He puts me on and we talk, and that's nice.
Amazing.
He remains, grateful for a good review.
That's amazing. What else, when you think about your career and highlights and lowlights? I mean, I think one of the things is you were in Chicago, then you're in San Francisco, you're in newspapers, then you're in magazines. And part of the problem is they open and close so quickly throughout, the arc of your career, the time that you were doing this, you kind of saw it all. I don't know what age you would call it, but you saw it all build up. You saw it all come down as the internet and digital and everything and consolidation and so on. But it was always a tough business to compete in, to have a newspaper, to have a magazine, and how many locals were there in big cities, less medium or smaller markets. But I would imagine that it was hard when things closed or when you got laid off. Like, what was the hardest struggle or job loss, or did you always handle it pretty well?
Well, when I was going through that, I was young, and we bounce at that age.
Right.
So Chicago Today folded right before I finished college, Northwestern, and I got the lifeboat to the Tribune because I was cheap. And I watched people around me who lost their careers, but I didn't. I still had a career and went up from there. And San Francisco, when I decided to get out of there, kind of wondered at the time, did I regret this? Should I go back? And I glad I didn't, because my friends who stayed in the newspaper business had sad lives pretty soon. But I got out. I went into magazines. Magazine people said, "Oh, newspaper people just don't work here." But I was faster than them, and so that's why I got a job there. That was fine. And so the Daily News then was in terrible shape. I loved that paper when I was young. I thought it was amazing, and it was a poor, bedraggled beast. When I was there, I went through a terrible strike. Robert Maxwell, an awful robber baron, bought it when I was there. And so that was sad to see. TV Guide, I saw it on the way down. So you're right. I'm a jinx, and I've caused lots of
everything you touch dies. You're worse than Trump.
It does. Yeah. And so that's all hard, but I've been really, really, really lucky. I wanted to be a Sunday editor. I was a Sunday editor. I wanted to do a column. I got a column. I wanted to be, it was just right place, right time.
Well, I feel like, I knew you'd sell yourself short plenty, but I feel like one of the things that you've done well in all this adaptation in your career, from newspapers and television to journalism and teaching and everything that you've done, is you study history, you write about it, but you're also one of the best people at looking at the future and predicting trends and seeing industries and jobs and opportunities. I mean, you created a magazine. You've created things that thrived. You've written things that have forecast a lot of what's happened. So how much do you think your success, and how important is it to talk to young people about watching trend lines so that you can try to understand? No one can predict exactly, but you do a really good job and have a great track record of seeing what's coming in media and technology in other industries as well. Is that something that you consider yourself, I don't think, lucky about? I think that's something you've worked hard at being good at.
No, I think there's a lot of luck to it. It's a lot of right place, right time. When I was TV critic, TV Guide, I was there at that moment when we got more choice in TV, and suddenly, the magazine shifted from covering the events in the star's career, the film, the TV show, whatever, to that in their lives, because that's how they had to pump sales, because the audience was fragmented. It was bodily fluids journalism. It was about babies and diseases and affairs and deaths and all that. And that's when I saw the need for a magazine to help people make choice with all kinds of new choices out there. And I just wrote a memo because I was, young and obnoxious, and wrote a memo. And it got rejected for 6 years. And then somebody said, "Oh, yeah, okay." And I was there, and I got to start a magazine. And it was a disastrous launch. It was terrible for lots of reasons. But I got that privilege. When I went online, I was just the right time. The web had just come out. The month I went to work for Advanced Publications, which is Condé Nast, I got to start all their newspaper sites and work on their magazine sites as well. I come to a brand new journalism school and I get to start 3 new degrees. I love starting stuff. So yeah, I tell young people today in journalism school, this is the right time to be there, as paradoxical as that might sound, because it's a time of change, because it's filled with old farts like me who need to finally get out of it. And they need to be radical in changing it. I think, Pete, my one regret, and I'm known as the obnoxious guy, but I was not nearly radical and obnoxious enough.
Huh.
I think the field is, every day we have the New York Times and the Washington Post, which I'll complain about like everybody else, because I think we want them to be better. Most newspaper chains in the U.S. now, apart from a few family-owned ones like the Newhouses and the Hearsts, are owned by hedge funds. They're dying horrible deaths.
Yeah.
The trust in American news is way down since the 70s. According to the Reuters Institute, a third of people around the world actively avoid news now. We have a nation that's not working very well, and I don't think journalism is helping. I think it's hurting. I think we've damaged lots of communities. So I'm not sure, in a way I can look at my entire career and say, well, that was a waste, because I don't know. I didn't come up with a solution to this. I don't even have it in my own head. I wrote a post the other day about how I think that we thought that we were in an information problem. And journalists love to think that because we're the solution to an information problem. Or we were in a belief problem. Look at these crazy things people say they believe to pollsters. Right. But I think that's signaling. I think that's performance. I think we're in a problem that Hannah Arendt talked about of not belonging. That in an authoritarian era, people are robbed of their private and public lives. They are rudderless. And then along comes a Trump, or along comes an Orban, or Pickham, and you belong to that. And that's dangerous. And I don't know what a journalism looks like that becomes a journalism of belonging, that doesn't just listen to people raving on with the crazy stuff that they know is going to get media attention, which is what's happening now. It's all life is clickbait. But what instead gets people to value their own lives, to value their own identities, to understand others and make strangers less strange, to build bridges. That's the journalism that I wish I'd spent the last 30 years working on. And only now, as I air quotes retire, do I say, oh, hell. I think it's fine to have tried to make journalism digital, but that's not a big deal. It's fine to try to work on business models for news, which I failed at, but that's not the real issue. I think we've got to fundamentally rethink what journalism and media do.
Well, you'll always be a part of that conversation as long as you're able to be a part of that conversation. And I'll always want to hear what you have to say about it. And without keep talking about that issue, which is pretty much the issue of our time, and one that you're great to talk about, and we've talked about it before, I want to just go back a little bit more to, kind of what you learned as a man. I mean, as a white, straight guy moving through this business, and we all know that Jeff Jarvis is woke AF. You've seen it all, and I know that you've created a tremendous amount of opportunity for people who aren't like you, don't look like you, don't have some of the privileges that you've had. But talk to me about how you've learned to be that guy. How did you learn to be kind of an anti-racist, anti-sexist guy in the industries that you worked in, which were pretty cutthroat and working around a lot of rough and tough people? You mentioned that one editor that you had to leave the door open because you weren't sure how crazy he was going to be. So whether it was total assholes, bad men, super racist or sexist people, like how did you navigate all of that and become this guy that I think that we all know that you are, who's very open-minded and tries to help and platform and create opportunity for a lot of others?
Well, thank you. I'm not that guy because I've got a lot more to learn to try to be that guy.
But that's why you are that guy, because you're open, because you're saying that.
I'm going to say the same thing to you. I remember as if televised in neon the day you were on, and I wasn't on with you that day. I hadn't met you yet, but you were on Up with David Gura talking about yourself as a man. And it was in the middle of Me Too. And you bared your nerves and bared your mistakes in life and talked about what it was to be a man today. And I honest to God, Pete, I'll always remember that. I think it was a great moment. and it taught me. Now, I similarly learn from my students all the time, right? And it took me, I was raised, I'm old enough, I was raised in this time in America of the myth of the melting pot. My grandparents were racist. My parents, God bless them, were not. And they tried very hard to teach my sister and me differently. But what they taught us of the time was, let's be colorblind, and there's a melting pot. It took me a lot of decades to see the racism in that, to see that was old white power saying everything will be okay when everybody's like us, but we're not going to let you be like us anyway, so it's not all going to be okay, and you can't do that, right?
Right. Well said.
And,
yeah.
I went through I was on the board of a foundation. It didn't work out very well. They had issues, and they got training about race. And I went through that with the rest of the board and the staff. And at first, I thought this was going to be too, touchy-feely, I guess. But the trainer was great. I've been through bad trainings. This was spectacular training. It's really good. And one of the exercises one day was we were supposed to reflect on, talk about our culture. And I said, I don't have a culture. I'm none of the above. I'm white bread. I'm Wonder Bread. I'm America.
Yeah, me too.
Right. Well, then she said, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Jarvis, you're wrong. And of course, it took me a minute to realize, it's exactly the problem, that I am the default and that people have to code switch for me and I don't have to code switch for anybody.
That's right.
And to understand that. And then I read, I quote often a book. I don't know if you've ever had him on. You should. Andre Brock Jr., who wrote Distributed Blackness, which is a study of Black Twitter. There's two great scholars on Black Twitter. Meredith Clark has a book coming out. She's from Northeastern University, and Andre Brock Jr. is at Georgia Tech. And Andre is brilliant. And in his book, Distributed Blackness, he talks really eloquently about I shouldn't say eloquently, of course he's eloquent, he's a professor, but he convincingly about the default of American media and culture and the internet particularly, that we think it's just the internet. And we don't acknowledge that, no, it's a white internet and that's the default of it. And so trying to get myself to see that in ways that I couldn't has been a huge lesson from my students, especially, I think.
Yeah.
And I've got so much farther to go. I've got so much more to learn. There's all kinds of things I don't know and screw up. But I came to this little bit of learning very late in life, and thanks to teaching.
Talk to me a little bit more about teaching and what that was like for you personally. Obviously, you're talking about how much you learned from your students. They're college students. They're New York City, mostly New Yorkers. They grew up or in and around New York, and they're very, very diverse. All colors, black, brown, you name it, white, all international as well. And they're all dealing with and coming of age in a world that neither you or I really came of age in. I mean, we literally knocked on doors and pounded pavement and sent letters and videotapes and so on. And now the world is different, and it's definitely, I think, fair to say, scarier. Maybe you would disagree, but what did you get out of it personally? Like, what was the reward versus some of your other jobs that you had in journalism and media? What did you get from that? What did you learn from them other than what you just talked to me about, just the diversity of ideas around culture?
I mean, I'm a fake academic. I have a bachelor's degree. I've started 3 master's degrees. I said that to an academic one time, and they thought, "Oh, why didn't you finish them?" No, I didn't take them. I started them. Right. So I started a brand new school. I was the first professor hired at what is now the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism. And so I got to be there from the beginning. And we didn't have any PhDs. We were all journalists. Steve Shepard had been the editor of Business Week, wonderful man. And we made it up as we went along. We were this tiny little boutique in gigantic CUNY. So they left us alone. And I had to learn about teaching. One of the things I had to learn early on is the idea of outcomes. We just think, they're going to take us, we're going to tell our old war stories and we'll teach them how to do things and they're going to leave a lot smarter. No, you've got to make a deal with the student. You've got to say, this is what you're going to learn here. And this is what we teach you. And it's a mutual obligation to do that. And that's around the word we use in schools is outcomes. So we have to craft the outcomes and do that. That was a big lesson for me. And then I got the real privilege. I started an entrepreneurial journalism program, which was a lot of fun to help students think like business people. For journalists, that's not the way they do it, but this gives them power to think about how they can start journalistic enterprises, but that's hard. And then with the next dean, Sarah Bartlett, I had written a chapter of a book that I wrote about journalism that nobody was going to buy called Geeks Bearing Gifts, in which I talked about relationship-based journalism, having a relationship with the community. And I said, are we doing this? And I said, not really. She said, how about a new degree? I said, cool. We made notes for it. We got Reid Hoffman gave us a couple $100,000 on the Knight Foundation, matched that. I hired this brilliant professor named Carrie Brown, and I got to start a second degree. And that's the proudest accomplishment of my career, is starting that degree with Carrie, because that's the one where we, with the students, do think about changing journalism and revolutionizing it. And the alums are phenomenal. They carry the torch of this. They go into newsrooms and they change them. They're the Trojan horses who say, yeah, I know that's the way you did it, but you've got to listen to the public you're serving in a different way. And it's just wonderful to watch them now do that. And I hope we can expand and take engagement journalism to more places.
What do you generalize about this generation that you have been teaching? Go ahead, generalize. If anybody's going to generalize about them, I would want it to be teachers who have a new crop of students every year, and they can come to some kind of generalization. I mean, anything that you want, if you can. Maybe it's not even a fair question.
Yeah, no, it's never fair to generalize, of course. And they get accused of being entitled. I don't think that's at all fair. They get accused of lots of things. I guess my one big lesson, and this is really around 2016 on, is that, let me back up. I question the doctrine of objectivity. I think it's bullshit. I think that Wesley Lowery is absolutely right when he wrote in the New York Times that it is a construct of white power and racism, that somebody in a newsroom can say, that's objective and that's biased. It doesn't work at all. But we still debate it to this day, and it drives me nuts. Our students are way past that in general. And the questions that they grapple with are about what journalists get hinky about, which is advocacy. That they're not just going to sit there and be the stenographers for the man.
Right.
They want to come into journalism to change the world. Well, that means they have a perspective, they have a worldview, and they have goals. They want outcomes. Now, yes, they have to learn the skills to do that. Yes, they have to learn the ways to navigate newsrooms and other places. And they too often leave newsrooms because they can't take it. And that's something we have to worry about in the field. But they don't come in anymore saying, I want to write for the New Yorker, and I want to write 8,000 word pieces, and I want to be famous doing that. They want to change the world. And so that's the thing that gives me the most hope. If I thought that journalism were dying, if I thought it were BS, I'd be a fraud teaching it. I don't. The hope that I have is that I tell the students every year I got to teach them in orientation, you're the ones who are going to change journalism. I'm too old. You're going to listen to what we teach you, and then you're going to question everything. Don't throw it all out, but question it all. And a lot of it goes back to following the money. Why is the internet screwed up now? Because of the business model that they got from mass media, the attention economy that leads to clickbait and trying to fool people into doing things and not giving them real value. So the students today, I think, have more of a mission. The other interesting thing, Pete, is that so we in journalism school forever taught the AP style book, and this is proper English, and this is the way to express yourself, and this is the way to construct a story, and so on and so forth. Students come in now with all kinds of different ways to express themselves that we need to respect. That they're going to be better at making TikTok or at understanding how to make stories online or at navigating social media, though some of them hate social media, which is interesting. And so we need to respect, I think, the dialects. I don't mean that just linguistically. I mean in media sense of how people can tell stories and how they can express themselves. And as we come with AI, I think it's interesting that I've been arguing, I think we talked about this together once, that AI might expand literacy. But a couple of my students said, whoa, hold on. That then means that you're going to make everybody code switch to this pablum that comes out of the machine. And I think they're right. But there's a lot of new tools to work with and new ways to do things. And what I want to do more than anything else is try to get the students to feel that they are empowered to experiment with that.
Why did you leave?
Honest answer? New administration, different directions, and it was time. And so I hope to go work with other schools, and maybe not full time, but maybe help start programs. There's a program I really wanted to start that I didn't in what I call internet studies. I'm more interested in studying the superset of the internet than the subset of journalism. And I think that in my next book, which will be out later this year, called The Web We Weave, about the internet, I argue that the internet's not a technology. It's a human network. And as a result, I think we need to bring the humanities and the social sciences to helping students build its future. So I want to involve many disciplines: anthropology, sociology, psychology, philosophy, ethics, community studies, design, history, and bring that into the context of how we got here with the internet and where we might go with the internet.
I love that.
So I want to find a place where I can try to help somebody start that, which would be a lot of fun.
You mentioned a couple of people, Steve Shepard, and you've mentioned Carrie Brown a couple of times. I wonder if you can tell me what, maybe a story, maybe an anecdote, or just a general idea that you've learned from somebody that you admire. You've worked with some amazing people throughout your career. You've been influenced by them. Is there anybody that really imparted some kind of wisdom that you can share with us about just anything? I mean, from how to behave to how to have integrity or chart your career or something funny, anything you want, because you have been around just pretty much. I mean, what a life you've had.
Tons. I'm a hothead. Steve taught me to cool down. Carrie was the first PhD we hired. She's a brilliant teacher. I learned tons next to her. Steve Newhouse, who's now the chair of advanced publications, including Condé Nast, was my boss for 12 years. And he's the one who really taught me that the internet is not about content. It's about conversation, which changed my entire view of what I do. Jim Wilsey, who was the editor of the Daily News when I was there, and before I worked with him after that, I worked with him at Advance. Before that, the San Francisco Examiner. He was a brilliant editor. I learned so much about how to look at packaging news. Alan Rusbridger, the former editor of The Guardian, I respect immensely and learned a lot about principles. I watched him when the whole Snowden story was going on and saw the weight of the world on his shoulder and how he dealt with that. And I think that is, by the way, he and Lionel Barber, the former editor of the Financial Times, have a new podcast out of Prospect magazine, which I find very good. Students of mine, I won't name them to make any of them jealous, but a lot of them, I've watched how they've grown and taken, as I say, this torch of engagement journalism and brought it into newsrooms. One of our students brought engagement journalism into the Marshall Project, and they changed their whole strategy around it. I mean, to watch that happen is just really cool. Students who've done a lot of brave things, I find. You know, I was at that time in the field when, okay, kid, you're going to work for a little paper, then a bigger paper, then a bigger paper, and then you're going to find that job. You keep working on it the rest of your life. Well, that didn't happen because everything blew up. And that some people, there are still friends of mine from the early days who are still in the field, barely holding on with fingernails.
Right.
I'm very lucky that I had the support to change, and that at every step I learned things from people, and I still do.
Let me just ask you the kind of the most personal question I can about your own practice, whether you mentioned you're a hothead and Steve Shepard helped you calm down. Like, emotionally, how have you developed? Do you have any kind of practice or philosophy? Are you a stoicist or a Buddhist or an anything-ist? Is there a practice? Because I've always just loved talking to you, being around you, your energy. I can imagine you getting upset, but like not at me. Or maybe, but even then, I would still respect you for it. Like, what is your thing? Do you have anything at all that's a through line in your life?
I was that jerk who would get mad at somebody on the cable company or the phone company and shout to get attention. Right? I was that person, and I'm not proud of that. And I brought that to the internet too. I could be a jerk in the early days of the internet. What changed me was 9/11. My kids even noted it. My son, who was, I think, 9 years old then, you know, ever since then, the short story is I was at the World Trade Center on 9/11 and obviously survived, but kind of barely. And my family thought I was missing that day, and I got back and I was there. And ever since then, I say, I love you to my family every day I leave. I didn't do that before. I came from a Presbyterian house. We didn't do that. But we all did after that. And I got atrial fibrillation, so I had to watch out for my heart and my temper. But that calmed me down all around. I just learned what's worth it. And so I still get upset. I'm still an asshole here and there. But that was probably the moment that changed my psyche.
You're both a great son and a great father, you strike me as. Your dad passed away, last year?
April, yeah, COVID, yep.
And how do you see yourself as a dad? I promise this is as personal as I get, but this is the most important one to me. What kind of father have you been? Have you tried to be?
I try. I'm never good enough. Never good enough.
By what measure?
I'm distracted. I work all the time. I traveled. So I don't think I ever gave my two kids the attention they needed. But my son kind of scolded me once when I would try to say something was my fault. And that was kind of egotistical, right? It's like, he has his own life. My daughter has her own life.
Right.
And we don't mold them as much as we think we do.
Yeah.
Right. I had a very privileged childhood. We weren't rich or anything, but we were upper middle class. My parents were nice, normal parents, and we moved around a lot, but I thought that was actually kind of good for me too. So it was okay. My sister became a minister, so she was the good child. A nice Scotch drinking minister, a nice, normal, not evangelical, liberal, good minister. And so I was very privileged. And, I hope that we have the chance to pass that privilege on to our kids, but it's about recognizing that they're going to run their own lives. And I watch you strike me also as a very good dad. And I love the pride that you have in your daughters. And I'm sure you're protective of them, and I'm sure you get nervous about them. But the hard part, I think, for my generation as parents, and I'll generalize this beyond me, is that we were the generation that we weren't free range parents, as Lenore Skenazy calls them.
Yeah, one of my idols.
She's great. And Lenore is right, I think, and I think we protected our kids way too much. The whole play date generation, the caution, the stranger danger. I don't think we let them fly on their own nearly enough, and I think that's across the board. And when I write now about the internet and teenagers, and Joe Scarborough, who I watch every morning just to get my blood pressure up, drives me a little nuts when he talks about.
I love it when he's not there, because I love the format of the show. And when Willie Geist is hosting, or even Mika, it's like straight ahead news, and they get to a lot of stuff, and it's no sports. I mean, I love when he's not there. I love the format of that show and the theme of it, but God, I can't stand when he's there.
I actually
love his opinions. Listen, I actually like his commentary. I just hate him as a host. He reminds me of so many other hosts, like Jim Brewer. Very funny guy, really entertaining, great opinions. But you have other people there, and you should ask them questions.
Every question is a soliloquy that doesn't end, which he'll
can't stand it.
But he does point out often, unlike the rest of media, that Joe Biden is doing a good job, and that the economy is in good shape, and that media are not doing a good job about this. So I respect him for that. What I do disagree with him on, and I've actually had a phone call with him about this, is when he goes on and on about how Facebook is ruining young people, and we have to do something about this and all that. And I don't think that we give our children nearly enough credit. And so we've taken the whole idea of play dates and overprotection now to the internet, where we don't let them experiment and learn on their own. What were your rules through the years with your daughters?
Well, early on learned about and recognized the danger of helicopter parenting. And so Val and I both were very free range. And our daughters, I think, are confident and independent as a result of that. We sent them into New York City alone at a young age, where every other parent here was terrified. And I pushed them everywhere I could, up a tree, into the pizza parlor alone, with a couple bucks. Like, I constantly tested them. And I knew also that stranger danger was bullshit, and that the real concern was the priest. I knew where it was endemic, and so I think I learned from it was Lenore Skenazy. Her work was real helpful, but also I think a lot of that was kind of commonsensical. Plus, I had that experience growing up, though I just never bought into the fears of that other parents were putting on their kids. And I wanted, the goal was always to raise the girls to be independent and confident. And so the idea of sheltering them, and I saw all the other parents. I mean, it's a huge chunk of my stand-up act and my work, and I hope it will continue to be, because I always saw that stuff, and we did the opposite, and I'm pretty proud of it.
That's part of your lessons about being a man and being a father. When did you realize you were funny or could be funny?
I thought this interview was about you.
Oh, fuck it. I'm a journalist. That's why I enjoy asking questions more than answering them. So I thank you for the soliloquy I was able to give over the last 2 hours. I'm very grateful.
Well, I mean, listeners probably know a lot of this, but it's high school, junior high. I was the smallest kid, and I hated bullies. My brother got bullied. My brother was really funny. But I think most importantly, both my parents are. But my dad, I recognized later that my dad had been doing bits my whole life. I just didn't know they were bits. Like, he would have a circle of people and he would tell a story. This guy said that, and then this guy did that. And he would do the voices, and we get huge laughs. And then I would see him do it again. My mom too. And I would see where the laughs, I was like, and I would see them refine it. And then I just took that and made it my own, because that's how I got my attention and confidence and eventual validation. And then I found out, it could be a job, but I did the talent shows in high school. I did stand up. So, and once you kill, that's a big risk, but I killed as a junior in high school in front of the entire school. And that was that.
That was, yeah. I accidentally became the lead in the Garden City High School play, Don't Drink the Water by Woody Allen.
I was in Don't Drink the Water in high school as well. Yes, indeed.
You're kidding me.
No, I played Walter Lippmann, I want to say.
Walter Hollander. We played the same role.
That is crazy.
Oh, that's hilarious.
We did that show in high school, and I loved it. It was a Woody Allen play. It was so much fun.
It was before he had cooties. So I had moved from New Jersey to Garden City, Long Island, and I wanted to just be part of the play. I was going to do the lighting or something nerdy, right? And I filled out the form, and it said, "What other productions you've been in? Have you worked on?" And I said, lighting, and I checked these other productions. Well, I did the tryout, right? And I did okay. And the coach misread it and thought I had acted in these other plays. I had merely strung up lights for the other plays. So they called me at night and they say, "You're the lead. You're Walter." I said, "Wow. Crap." It was terrible.
The production?
There came a moment in rehearsals where the drama coach said, "Okay, we're going to do an exercise here, and Jeff, you're going to play the Sheik, and the Sheik's going to be Walter." The Sheik is a guy, I always remember this name, Namir El-Kadi, who's been in movies. He became a real actor in life.
Wow.
And so Namir played it, but the students were so wonderful and so nice, they didn't want to do well because they didn't want me to get kicked out of the part. So I still kept the part. My point is, finally, I remember that moment. I ad-libbed one line, culturally insensitive, when Dad comes in and sees his leggy daughter kissing the nerdy diplomat. Remember this?
Axel McGee.
Oh boy, you're better than I am. So I ad-libbed the line. I mean, when I saw this, I was supposed to act shocked. I just came in and I said, because it was Long Island, I said, "Oy vey." And the place cracked up.
That's great.
Right? And so I remember my chin quivering with happiness.
Yeah.
At reaction. Of course, that wasn't me. It was Walter Hollander. I think it was Hollander. But yeah, there's something about being on a stage in a high school and not getting killed.
It's a deadly drug. And
let me ask you another question about this. Do you think I must be curious about this. Well, I'll tell you my part of it first. I think that when my mother told jokes, she was trying to be Lucille Ball. And when my father told jokes, he was trying to be Johnny Carson. And I think my generation of not professional comics, I want to be David Letterman, right? We have these examples that are set for us. Do you think your parents had those examples? Did they have a style that was of the time?
I think my mom had a Lily Tomlin example. She was a huge fan. And I don't know that my dad ever held anybody up like that or watched anybody regularly. I think my dad was just a street kid growing up, and he was a small kid too. And, that's what he found humor, and that helped him become likable with his friends, I'm sure with girls. And then later on as a salesman, until you crossed a guy, don't do that. But I don't think that. And then later, when we were adolescents, we found George Carlin audio cassettes hidden, like they were hidden, and we listened to them.
Like Playboys.
Yeah, but exactly. So he was clearly a fan of good comedy. And years later, when I was 16, he knew I wanted to be a stand-up. He took me to see Carlin live at the Syracuse Civic Center, and my dad and I watched Carlin, and about 3/4 of the way in, he got to abortion, and he was making fun of pro-life people, and a bunch of people got up and walked out. And I'll just never forget, because I was like, my dad was pissed, and I'll never forget why, because my dad, he wasn't pissed that they were offended. He was mad at anybody who walked out of a game early at Syracuse University or a show early, because he was so cheap. He's like, you paid and you're leaving early. Even if it was a shitty movie, like, we weren't leaving early. You paid for it. And I never agreed with that principle, but he certainly stuck. He always has stuck to it.
Did you have an exemplar, a comedy exemplar?
Yeah, Dana Carvey.
Okay.
I did. I got into my high school talent shows was me doing my impersonation of his impersonations, and my brother was a fan of Saturday Night Live at that time, and so we would watch it together, and he helped me develop my humor as well. But yeah, Dana Carvey, who I met years later at SiriusXM, and he must have been so tired that day, but it was one of those moments where you meet your heroes, and I met all of my heroes. I've met them all, most of them. But when I met him, I was working there, I was on air, I walked up to him, he just walked out of Howard Stern, and I said, "You're the reason I started doing comedy." He's like, "That's great, man."
I used to judge when I was a columnist in San Francisco. I used to judge the comedy competition.
Oh, that was a big one. That was the
right?
one.
So Dana Carvey,
sure.
A. Whitney Brown, and other comics of the era were out there all the time.
Did you see Robin?
Yes, I did. Didn't judge him. He was already huge.
Right.
Yeah. What a genius. What a friggin' genius.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, for folks still listening, usually we talk about all different sorts of things, but I do want to just get your take, because we haven't talked in a while, and hopefully we'll talk more throughout the campaign. We're talking on the day of the Iowa caucuses that happened tonight. But what are your thoughts on 2024 right now, and the prospects of it being Biden versus Trump? And there's so much to comment, to think about. I mean, how are you thinking right now today, almost 10 months out?
I think it's Biden versus Trump. And I admire Joe Biden immensely, and I'm enthusiastic. Last time around, I was for Hillary first. That didn't work out. Then in the last time around, I was for Kamala and Corey and even a few others before Joe. But I was wrong. Joe was the right person. He's done a spectacular job. This is what disappoints me most about my field, that when they're saying, "No, he's too old," or they're saying people don't understand about the economy, because you're not informing people, media. You're not accepting the responsibility for your role and your job. You act all powerful all the time. When people don't know what they should know, you abrogate any responsibility. And so it makes me terribly angry day upon day at the New York Times and the Washington Post. And this is why I will give, even though he drives me nuts, I will give Joe Scarborough a lot of credit, because he is the one guy who was out there all the time saying, that's all BS. Biden's doing a good job. The economy's in good shape. What the hell are you idiots doing? And Joe drives me nuts, but I think that's really important, and we don't see enough of that. So I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be close again. It's going to be stupid again. But I think that we haven't grappled with what's really happening in this autocratic age. And we don't have a journalism that's ready for it. We don't have media that's ready for it. We don't have positive media that tries to model good behavior and good civic life. And so, yeah, I'm worried. How about you?
I'm pretty much don't talk. I talk about it about once a week or maybe twice a week about the kind of what the possible outcomes are, because I really feel a couple weeks ago, my friend Barry Ritholtz is a stats guy, said predictions have never, ever been right about a presidential race this far out.
Right.
This time is different. I realize that for a lot of different reasons. But I just think I don't want to say a lot until I see these trials play out. And they're going to play out. Like, you tell me what you think. But we're going to watch Trump on trial during the day, and then people are going to go to their primary place at night. And I think a lot of them certainly will be encouraged. You know, they see him as being victimized and a martyr. I get that. I understand that will. But I think that some people during these trials, especially in the D.C. circuit with, Jack Smith, the federal trial, there's going to be new evidence, and there's going to be new audio recordings, I believe, and maybe even video, who knows, but there's going to be testimony from people like Mark Meadows. And I'm not saying it breaks the fever of the hardcore people, not necessarily. They're going to see him as demonized and Christ on the cross. But I do think, I think it'll matter. Those trials playing out the same day, the same week of a primary, feels to me like that's something worth waiting before we get too much. What do you think about that?
I think you're right. And for those who think that it's going to make Trump more popular, we have no choice but to maintain a system of justice. I'm worried about the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I'm worried about lots of things that could happen.
Yeah.
But we have to bring him to justice.
And what do you think about the 14th Amendment path that several states?
I think that it is the law of the land and the strict constructionists. I think that for them to, my guess is going to be, and I'm always wrong about this. I'm wrong about this court of all courts, but I think they're going to punt to the extent of saying it is up to the states.
Right, potentially. And then finally, I think the most important point is the least interesting one because everybody makes it. Abortion is on the ballot in a lot of different ways in a lot of different states. And Democrats keep winning in every off year and special election almost everywhere. And then when it's on the ballot as a referendum in red states, the women's reproductive rights side, the pro-choice side is winning. And I just feel like it's like we have to fill space when talking about this, but it starts and ends to some extent with the issue of abortion. Do you think I'm putting too much weight on that?
No, I don't think so at all. And I think I wish we could get more ballot initiatives on abortion in more state, because it's going to bring people out. It's what Michael Moore says all the time. Yep. You've got to have people on. I'm going to bring up Hannah Arendt again, who says that in an authoritarian time, people concentrate on abstract issues.
Right.
And abstract issues like guns and abortion. Are those really the most important things in people's lives? No. Their families and their health and their jobs are more important than that. But we created this culture of meme, this culture of projection, political projection, that it's the way you belong is by saying, that's what I think, or that's what I think. But at the end of the day, a lot of these people have had abortions, and a lot of the people have daughters, and they, I think, will end up voting with their real life at that point. There was a study I quoted in my next book from some scholars who were at the International Communications Association in Paris, and they said that there's research that says that people aren't really voting for their real lives. They're voting as a matter of signaling, a performance. Right. And I think that's certainly true with polls. That's what people do in polls.
Yeah,
but at the end of the day, I think abortion is a case where what they say and what they believe in their own lives is different.
You, I'm sure, know about that ad and how effective it was for the governor, to Democrat Andy Beshear, to win his reelection in Kentucky. The ad with a 10-year-old girl or something like that who talked about getting raped.
Yep.
And sadly, we now, if you follow it, people like Jessica Valenti and anybody, Liz Winstead, that's writing about abortion daily. By the time November, we're going to have so many nightmares, so many horrible things that women are going to have to deal with. We've seen them playing out. When they get publicized, activists will exploit the hell out of them, as they should, so that there is no choice for people. So they realize how serious the consequences are horrific, meaning there's going to be a whole bunch of those types of ads because it really, they know, it works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's going to make a big difference. And the economy, I understand people yell at me when I say the economy is in good shape. Well, you don't understand people. It's always the case. And people of a certain age never lived through a recession. I did in the 70s. right? So I know what 14% inflation was like, and interest rates, and whichever it was. And so I think that and I appreciate that people are not as well off as they want to be. They never are. But the economy is a miracle. It's a damn miracle. We came through a pandemic. We have the internet that kept us going. Jobs are up. We are in good shape as a nation. We're in better shape than all of Europe. Germany and the UK are in the crapper. We've got to allow ourselves a moment of gratitude.
Let me tie it all together by asking you this question. Are you, Jeff Jarvis, as well off as you thought you needed to be? I mean, I look at you and it seems like you've done well in your life. It seems like you have nice things. As far as I could tell, you have one shirt. So you don't seem that materialistic. So are you as well off as you'd like to be and have been in your life?
I'm very, very fortunate that when I worked for Condé Nast, I made a good salary. And, from starting Entertainment Weekly, I went way up in salary, and then I made better money as it went. And then when I started teaching, it went way down. But still is a good salary. And I saved well. My wife and I don't go on vacations. We don't, she's driving I think a 12-year-old car, and mine's a 9-year-old car. We just talked to the guy today about getting a new roof. That's where we spend money. A septic tank and a roof. That's where we spend most of the money. Kids are out of college. So, yeah, I think, we were always nervous, but officially I'm retired, right? That's it. I'll probably do some other gigs and I'll probably do some other things, but officially I got what I got. And so I feel, knock wood, in good shape. I am privileged because I saved and the investments worked out well. I put some stock in Amazon and Google, and, that's been nice to me. So, yeah, I think that I can only find myself to be very lucky. You can always want more, but I'm lucky.
Did you ever struggle with being really worried about your financial security and how am I going to put my kids through college and retire? Did you have those moments, or were you always pretty secure?
Right after we got married, my wife and I, I bought my first place. A friend of mine insisted that I had to buy a place. I bought in Brooklyn, and I made a little bit of money on that when we married. And she had a rent control apartment in Hoboken, 25th floor, view of all Manhattan. She had to give it up because I came along. We bought a townhouse we hated. But I remember talking in bed one night where we had, at that point, we'd saved up, we had $10,000 in the bank. We had a mortgage, it was a lot more than that. But we had $10,000 in the bank. And I thought, okay, if the job turns bad, then that's going to take me this long and I'll be okay. And that was when we were doing really well. And so from then on, I think it's just being careful. And again, I've been lucky. I haven't been unemployed since I was 17 years old. A lot of people are. A lot of people take a lot of time to do that. It's freaky for me now being unemployed. But
is there anything? Okay. Is there anything that you look at and say, I like that, but I can't afford it?
Oh yeah, all the time. All the time. Sure, I'm acquisitive, but it's certain things like I have an Android 6, Pixel 6. I'd love a Pixel 8. My Chromebook isn't my favorite. I love that, but no, I stop myself. Dr. Strange love.
You're pretty frugal then. If you won't buy like the best computer and phone, you're Jeff Jarvis. You're a tech guy, and you're not buying yourself the best computer and phone.
I will do it, but my wife is incredibly good at this. She keeps. We do what we have to do. We buy a septic tank. That's no fun buying a septic tank.
She keeps track of the dough, of the money coming in there.
Oh yeah. She was very unimpressed when we got married.
Me too.
About two things. I thought it was really quite amazing, Pete, that I had discovered that kitchen cabinets were the exact right size to store old copies of the New York Times. She did not find that impressive at all. And second, I insisted, she makes fun of this to this day, I insisted that I was paying bills once a month. I pay bills on the first of the month. That's it. She said, no, you idiot. Then you're going to pay interest. I don't care. I pay them on the first of the month. No, you have to pay them when they come in. I'm taking over the bills. Thank God.
Yeah, I had a very similar but far more embarrassing when Val moved in with me and kind of figured stuff out. I guess she saw a credit card bill come in, and she saw that I owed, I think it must have been like $4,000 in credit card debt. And I just remember her saying to me, I don't understand. I go, what do you not understand? She's like, why haven't you paid this? I was like, I don't know. Just pay just pay whatever's required. And she's like, why would you, she just hit me right between the eyes. She goes, why would you spend money that you don't have? And I was just like, well, but there's things I wanted that I didn't have. What do you mean? And that was it. She took my credit cards and we paid them off for the last 20 years. So it's sometimes great when you have a partner who is.
I'll tell you the toughest part of retiring is I give up my vaunted United Airlines global services status. That's the highest status. That's when you kick little old ladies out of the jetway. Oh, yes, Mr. Jarvis, we're glad to see you back again. Oh, sorry, Mr. Jarvis. That's gone now. My expense account is gone. I'm not flying, business class or conferences anymore.
It is tough to be downgraded from a service that's more elite. I mean, when I worked for CNN, they flew me first class for like 8 weeks, and I'll never forget going back to economy. And I was like, what is this?
Oh, it's torture, isn't it?
It's true of all things, though. It's true. It can be true of your home, your car. You get a taste of something, you don't want to go back, but that's all a trick too. But with flying, though, it is different because it's such a different experience, and it's not miserable, and it can be fun and more comfortable. I imagine. I've never had that high status, so I don't know. I have my own jet, so I don't know.
Yeah. And you've learned to fly it too.
It's a shed with wings. Jarvis, I'll let you go. This was absolutely wonderful. It's been way too long. I'm so excited about whatever.
Well, thank you for letting me on my long soliloquy of my life. I appreciate
you sharing it all with us and your wisdom and life and experience and perspective on things. It's so credible and so important and always so welcome. And people love when you join me. It's been way too long. Let's do it again soon.
You're the greatest, my friend. Thank you.
All right, there he goes, Jeff Jarvis. Everybody check him out on all the social medias or at buzzmachine.com, Gutenberg, parenthesis.com. He's on Mastodon. He's on it all, and he's still on Twitter and tweeting and Xing or whatever you call it. And I very happy that he joined me. I hope you appreciated that and got as much out of it as I did. I hope to see you in Las Vegas, March 22nd, 23rd. Get your tickets now. John Carroll will be there. He is here right now, taking us out. Love you, Bumblebees, here at the end. Talk to you tomorrow.
You can't see the forest for the burning trees. You got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long. You got the creaky knees. You got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. We got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for loss, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up and show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.